Let me ask you something honest. How much money have you spent on fishing gear in the last 2 years? Take a second and actually think about it. Rods, reels, line, lures, tackle boxes, terminal tackle, maybe a fish finder or a new kayak. Now ask yourself a harder question. Are you catching more fish than you were 2 years ago? For a lot of anglers, the honest answer is no. The gear pile got bigger, and the fish count stayed about the same. That is not a coincidence. There are habits that quietly bleed your wallet and keep your catch rate flat at the same time. And most anglers never connect the two. Hit subscribe before we get into it. I put out honest fishing content that does not try to sell you anything. And this video is a good example of why that matters. I'm Jerry Davis, and I've spent enough time around boats, tackle shops, and fishing gear to know when anglers are paying for performance and when they're paying for a habit they've never bothered to question. Today, we're talking about 10 fishing habits that cost you money while actually making you less effective on the water. Some of these are going to be obvious. Some are going to sting a little. All of them are worth thinking about before you open your wallet the next time you're standing in the fishing aisle. The first habit is buying new lures before you fish the ones you already own. This one is the foundation of the whole problem. Most anglers have a tackle box, a tray, a bag, or an entire dedicated drawer full of lures that have touched the water maybe twice. And yet every trip to the tackle shop ends with at least one new package being ripped open. Here's the reality. A lure only catches fish when it is in the water, presented correctly, in the right conditions, by someone who understands how it moves. The lure itself is one piece of a much larger puzzle. What most anglers call a dead lure is usually a lure they haven't learned to use. Before you buy another soft plastic, another crankbait, or another package of jig heads, go back through what you already have and actually spend a full fishing session on one or two presentations. You will learn more and catch more than you will by adding another color to a collection you're already not using. The second habit is upgrading your rod and reel when what actually needs upgrading is your technique. I get it. A new rod feels good. A new reel feels better. And tackle shop marketing does everything it can to convince you that sensitivity, gear ratio, and blank taper are the reasons you are not catching fish. But here's what experienced anglers know. A skilled angler with a $50 spinning combo will consistently outfish a beginner with a $300 setup. The rod does not cast. You cast. The reel does not feel the bite. You feel the bite. Equipment matters at the margins, but technique is the engine. If you are missing strikes, the problem is more likely your hook set, your slack line, or your presentation than the pound test rating of your blank. Spend half of what you were going to put into new gear on a guided trip or a few hours on the water with someone who actually knows how to fish the technique you're trying to learn. You will get more out of that investment than anything sitting on a tackle store wall. The third habit is changing lures every 15 minutes instead of changing location or depth. This is one of the most common and expensive patterns in recreational fishing. An angler makes 5 or 6 casts with one lure, doesn't get a bite, reaches into the tackle bag, and pulls out something else, then repeats the cycle. By the end of a 4-hour morning, they've run through half a dozen presentations and haven't fished any of them long enough or thoroughly enough to know whether the fish were there or not. Fish are either present in a location or they aren't. A crankbait that isn't catching fish in an empty cove isn't going to catch fish because you switched to a swim bait. The problem is usually location, depth, time of day, or water temperature, not color selection. Before you swap lures, move. Fish a different depth. Find current, structure, shade, or a temperature break. That decision costs you nothing. Reaching into the bag costs you time and focus, and eventually the money you spent filling it. The fourth habit is neglecting gear maintenance until something breaks. This is a quiet and very expensive one. Spinning reels that never get cleaned develop grit in the drag system and inconsistent bail function. Bait casters that don't get oiled start developing bearing noise and corrosion in the level wind mechanism. Rods with damaged guides develop line wear that eventually costs you a fish and the line attached to it. Hooks that aren't checked after snags on rock or wood become dull without you realizing it. And a dull hook is one of the top reasons fish are lost after the strike. The maintenance that prevents a $60 reel from becoming a $40 paperweight takes about 10 minutes and a small bottle of oil. Rinsing your gear after saltwater exposure, checking your guides before every trip, testing your drag before you need it, and running a fingernail across your hook points before you tie them on. These things cost almost nothing and prevent the kind of failures that happen at the worst possible moment. The angler who takes care of average gear will outperform the angler who neglects expensive gear every time. The fifth habit is fishing the same spots the same way every single trip, regardless of season. This is one of the most consistent patterns that separates anglers who catch fish from anglers who don't. Water temperature changes the way fish behave, where they hold, how deep they go, how aggressively they feed, and what presentations they respond to. A bass that is sitting in 2 feet of water along a shallow flat in late spring is in a completely different location doing completely different things in August when surface temperatures are in the upper 80s. If your strategy is to go back to the same bank you fished in May and throw the same spinnerbait in July, you are not fishing. You are practicing casting in an area that has probably been vacated by the fish you're looking for. Understanding seasonal movement patterns for the species you target will do more for your catch rate than any product you can buy. Find out where your target species spends time at different water temperatures and start moving with them instead of waiting for them to show up at your favorite spot. The sixth habit is buying too much premium line and using it in the wrong places. Fluorocarbon has legitimate advantages. It has lower visibility in clear water, it sinks, and it resists abrasion better than monofilament in many situations. But it is also significantly more expensive, it has more memory on a spinning reel, and it can be harder to manage in cold weather when it gets stiff. Anglers consistently overspend on line by using their most expensive fluorocarbon in every situation, including murky water, where visibility is not a factor, or on lures with enough action that line type barely matters. Braid with a fluorocarbon leader is a better setup for many applications than full fluorocarbon, and it is almost always less expensive over the course of a season. On the other end, anglers who use light monofilament for applications that demand abrasion resistance are losing fish to line failure that a few dollars more would have prevented. The habit worth building is matching the line type and pound test to the specific technique and condition, rather than buying the most premium option available and calling it covered. The seventh habit is fishing with dull hooks and never sharpening them. This one drives me nuts because it is completely free to fix and it costs anglers more fish than almost any piece of gear they own. A hook that has been dragged across rock, submerged timber, or concrete riprap is probably not as sharp as it was when it left the package. A hook that has been sitting in a tackle box for 2 seasons may have developed a light layer of oxidation at the point that you cannot see but can feel. The standard test is to drag the hook point lightly across your thumbnail. If it bites and catches, the hook is sharp enough. If it slides, it needs attention. A basic hook file costs a few dollars and fits in any tackle bag. For small hooks, it is often faster and more practical to simply replace them, since chemically sharpened hooks in smaller sizes are inexpensive in bulk. The habit of checking hook sharpness before tying on and after any contact with hardcover is one of the cheapest and most effective adjustments an angler can make. The eighth habit is buying pre-rigged or pre-tied setups from the tackle shop, when tying your own would cost a fraction of the price and perform just as well. Most tackle shops carry pre-rigged Carolina rigs, pre-assembled drop shot setups, and pre-tied leader rigs with retail markups that reflect the labor and packaging involved. The hook, the swivel, the weight, and the leader material in those packages are not special. They are the same components you can buy in bulk and rid yourself in about 3 minutes. Learning 5 reliable knots covers almost every freshwater and light saltwater application. The Palomar knot, the improved clinch knot, the uni knot, the uni-to-uni connection, and a basic loop knot will handle the majority of what most anglers need. Once you can tie these consistently, you stop paying convenience pricing for something you can do with your hands and a few cents of material. And when you tie your own rigs, you also control the component quality, the leader length, and the overall setup in a way that a prepackaged rig doesn't allow. The 9th habit is ignoring the first and last hour of light on the water. This one is about time more than money, but time on the water is directly connected to how much gear you feel like you need to buy to compensate. Anglers who consistently fish during peak feeding windows tend to see more action with modest gear because the fish are more willing to commit. Anglers who show up at 9 in the morning in summer, after the surface has already warmed and the light penetration has driven fish deeper, work harder for the same result. In warmer months especially, the early morning window and the evening period before dark are often when predatory species are most actively feeding near accessible cover. That does not mean midday fishing is pointless. It means that if you are only fishing a few hours at a time, those hours matter. Maximizing productive time on the water is a habit that costs nothing and consistently returns more than the next new lure or rod upgrade. The 10th habit is paying premium retail prices for terminal tackle when budget alternatives from the same broad category perform the same function. Offset worm hooks, split shot weights, barrel swivels, snap swivels, and basic jig heads are components where brand name carries very little functional advantage for the average freshwater angler. The manufacturing processes for basic terminal tackle are well established. The materials are similar across most brands, and the functional difference between a name brand offset hook and a comparable budget hook from a reputable bulk supplier is often negligible for typical bass, panfish, or walleye fishing. This is different from high-stress applications like saltwater fishing, where hook gauge, corrosion resistance, and weld quality matter more and justify the extra cost. But for a weekend angler throwing soft plastics in a freshwater lake, paying 3 times the price per hook for a brand label that the fish cannot read is a habit that adds up quietly over a season. Buy quality where it matters. Cover type, line strength, and hook sharpness matter more than the logo on the hook eye. Now, I want to be clear about something before we wrap this up. None of this means you should go out and buy the cheapest version of everything. That is a different mistake. The point is that most anglers who are spending more and catching less are caught in specific patterns that have more to do with habits than they do with gear quality. Buying lures instead of skills. Upgrading equipment instead of improving technique. Fishing the wrong time in the wrong place with the wrong expectations, and then blaming the presentation. These patterns repeat because the tackle industry is very good at offering new products as the solution to every fishing problem. And some of those products are genuinely worth buying. But the habits that actually put fish in the boat are cheap or free. Patience on a productive spot. Sharpened hooks. Matched gear to technique. Seasonal awareness. Properly maintained equipment. A smaller number of presentations fished with real confidence. Think about the last few fishing trips that felt frustrating. Was the problem really the gear, or was it one of the things we just talked about? Be honest in the comments. Tell me which of these habits you recognize in yourself, because I guarantee most of us are guilty of at least 2 or 3 of them. I know I've caught myself reaching into the bag too early when I should have been moving to better water. Good fishing gear is not the gear with the highest price or the loudest marketing. It is the gear that fits the way you fish, holds up under the conditions you put it through, and does not create another problem while you're trying to solve the first one. And good fishing habits are worth more than anything you'll ever pull off a tackle shop wall. Hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to see it. I'm Jerry Davis, and I'll catch you in the next one.